Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to look at Tableau calculations. So I'll give you an example of basic calculation, aggregate calculation, table calculation, and LOD calculation. And then you can explore them further to understand them in more detail. So for that, I have used sample superstore data. Before you start with anything in Tableau, like before, even if it's like a simple chart, I think what you should start with is understanding your data. So if I look at this data, I should know the level of granularity of that data. So if I look here, the order ID is repeated, and I see that it's repeated for different subcategories. There is this order ID which is repeated multiple times. It's repeating for different categories, different subcategories. The customer information seems to be same. Since it's the same order ID, it makes sense. But all these values are different. So the granularity of quantity, discount, profit is at not only at order ID level, but also at category level. So keeping that in mind, we will write our calculations. Let's start with basic calculation. Let's take ordered ID, and let's create a calculation that gives us the difference between sales and profit. Let's call it cost. So if I click this calculation, this is known as row level calculation because I'm using fields, row level fields, and I'm not aggregating that rows at any level. What's aggregated calculation? We will look at that later. So this is the row level calculation because I'm not doing anything with the field. I'm not aggregating it, not using LOD. I'm just using the row level fields here. So how this calculation will work is that for whatever level of granularity is in the your view, it will create that calculation for that level. So right now the level is order ID level. So for every ordered ID, it will add up the cost and it will give you the total cost. So if I add category here, remember this value 268. Maybe you should remember the second value. So remember the second value 718. And if you add these two categories, this is that value. So whatever is the level of granularity in your view, row level calculations are created at that level. Let's create one more. Let's see. Stick. And let's see. We want to change this city in some way. Let's say I want to use upper for this city. This is a row level calculation again because I'm using this field without doing anything to it. I'm using a row level field. So if you look here, there are different functions there. If you look for string functions, you can see there is a contains, there is a find, there is a lower, and we were right now we are using upper. And if you look here, you can see that how it works. And it's there available for numbers, for dates. In dates, you can add and increment it in some way. You don't have to remember all of those functions. You can just check, okay, I want to use a string function. Okay, can I use one of these? Like that. Now let's look at aggregated calculation example. Let's say we have a segment and we're looking at sales data. So if I do this, it's showing me sum of sales, and I can change the aggregation method, or I can write a calculated field which calculate sum of sales so that I have more control over it. So you might ask, like, what's the difference between the two? Why do we have to write sum of sales like this if you can just do that? I think what aggregation functions help us with is writing more complex calculations which you can't do this way. So if I do sum of sales and let's say I want to divide this by distinct count of customer ID to get average sales per customer, I can modify that using these aggregate functions. What this does, it aggregates the data at whatever is the level of granularity in your view. Same for the count distinct, same for sum. If we change the, let's add, if we change the level of granularity, it will change the calculation in the same way. Now we can, now let's look at LOD calculation, level of detail calculations. So let's say we have a segment in the view and category, and we are looking at sum of sales. Let's say you want to create sum of sales at segment level. Right now it's calculated at whatever is the level of detail in your view. So right now it's calculated at segment and category level. But let's say you want sum of sales per segment, irrespective of the level of detail in your view. That's when you use LOD calculations, when you are calculating something at a level that's different from the level of your view. There are three types of LOD calculations: fixed, include, and exclude. So we will look at fixed calculations where we will say fixed segment, and for every segment, give me sum of sales irrespective of the dimensions in my view, irrespective of the level of detail in my view. So what I can write is fixed, write all the dimensions you want to use, then some aggregate, sum of sales, bracket close. Now you can see that the sales is calculated at segment level. Table calculations. Let's say we have, again, we can take segment and category, and we have sales information, and we want to see what's the percent of total sales across different segment. So right now it's doing table down, so it's taking percent of total rows. Let's say you want to do it across pane, then you can do it like this. So it will give you for every segment what's the percentage of sales for different categories. And if I add subcategories here, it will give you the same thing but for subcategories for every pane.